Welcome, everyone. I want to go ahead and get started. We have a pretty full agenda. Each one of the items shouldn't take too long, but we want to move through it. To start, I want to see, do we have any commissioners and guests on the phone? Could you please let us know?
Dwayne Stark is on the phone.
Okay, thank you, Representative Stark. I'll go ahead and call a roll. Commissioner Tapia is here. Senator Prozansky, are you on the telephone? Commissioner Underhill is here. Representative Stark is by phone. Commissioner Bobette is here. Commissioner Hicks is here. Commissioner Kiki Parker Rose, are you on the telephone? Okay. Greg H. is here. Commissioner
Campy.
Kempy.
It's walking in right now.
Okay. Commissioner Campy is walking in. Welcome, Commissioner Campy. Do we have space?
Thank you.
Down there.
Okay. Commissioner Campy was just appointed to the commission, and before I finish, Roy, I just want to welcome you to your first meeting. Sorry about the lack of space with the table.
Sorry about running late.
And Denise Pira and Annie Wynn, are you here? Okay. Executive Director Schmidt is here. Tiffany from the staff is here. John Fitzgerald is going to be here. Ken Sangerin. Okay. Did I get that right? And Ross is here. So, did I miss anybody? Okay. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing on our list is we'd like to honor a commissioner who has served 8 years, and he said I could call him Greg H. He said anybody that knew him would laugh, but it's Hazra Bedian.
Very good.
Yes. And we have something to recognize his 8 years of service. And what I'd like to do is have Mike and myself present this to him. And if any commissioners would like to say anything to Greg, please do so. Then I'll give Greg a couple minutes if he would like to say something as well afterwards. So. Do we have
We'll get a picture.
A picture
For the Twitter.
definitely from the screen? Yeah.
Where would you like me to be?
Right here. Perfect. There, he's down in the middle. There we go.
Thank
Right.
you.
Would anybody like to say anything to Greg? Anybody? Any commissioners? Well, I know I would, Greg. I just, although I'm new, I can't imagine 8 years down the road what that will look like. That's quite an accomplishment. For people to volunteer for the citizens of the state of Oregon that long is really amazing. So thank you very much. And I'll turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Am I on?
Hit the little orange button.
Okay.
There you go.
Actually, it's about 9 years because I finished the tail end of somebody's term and then served 2 terms. All I wanted to say is it's been an honor to work with this changing group of commissioners and the changing and improving staff at the commission. And I have seen the commission grow in size and in stature and in respect in that building down the street in amazing ways under the leadership of Craig and now Mike. And it just continues to be an upward trajectory from when I came on board in 2009. And I just thought that ought to be in the record. Thank you all.
Thank you, Greg.
Can I say something?
Thank you, Greg. And Mike, would you like to say anything?
It's hard. Okay. Yeah, I just, I took over as a new director 3 years ago now, a little over 3 years, which seems like a long time ago. But Greg was one of the great commissioners and Chair Larson at the time. I mean, we just had such a great group, and they really kind of set the tone for how this commission operated. At the time, Walt Beglau was the district attorney. We kind of had a rolling cast. Rob, you were there, and some others. But this commission was then and continues our commissioners to have just a very thoughtful discourse around the issues. But the times that we haven't come to consensus and unanimity around things just by talking it out, it's hard to think of those times, because usually the commission has really been on the same page. And I think, Greg, you had a lot to do with that, of just being a voice around the table who brought your experience and your expertise that was very needed to the commission, and enabled us to have really thoughtful conversations that got us to where we needed to be. And so, as a brand new as an executive director, I've really appreciated working with you and our commissioners then and since. I've just been it's just a great place to work. And the number of times that I've had commissioners come up to me, Greg included, just saying, "Hey, how can we help? Tell us what you need from us," as staff, has just been super appreciated by all the staff at the CJC. So we really thank you for that and your service.
Thanks.
If I could just add real quickly, I guess with your departure, I'm the person that's been on the commission the longest now. And I just want to echo what Mike had to say. I come from a DA perspective, defense attorney perspective, but we've always worked collaboratively to get really good results. And I really echo what you said. I've seen this commission grow and become probably arguably one of the most respected agencies in the Capitol building. And you can just see that because they assign us new duties all the time. And I think you're a big part of that. You're Carol Larson, we're a big part of making this commission what it is.
Let me just quickly add that there are people on your side of the aisle and people on my side of the aisle who don't understand the concept that when we although we tangle like wildcats in courtrooms from time to time, that does not mean we have to behave that way when it comes to policy issues in bodies like this. And I've been grateful for DA Beglau and now DA Underhill carrying that same perspective that I bring to this. And I know that Jessica is an excellent choice to continue that kind of working relationship. So thanks.
Thank you all. Next, we have Mike Schmidt will give us some new introductions to the CJC staff.
Great. Commissioners, we've had a couple new additions since last we met, and so I'd like to introduce you to them. Ken will be speaking today, so you'll get to hear a little bit more from him. But first of all, it's Ken Sanchagrin. Ken is the new research director at the Criminal Justice Commission, which is a position that we have not previously had. We made the internal decision to repurpose what was a manager position on the grant side of the house to the research side of the house. And it's really been pursuant to, as Commissioner Bovet pointed out, the legislature's ever-increasing appetite and need for more and more research from the Criminal Justice Commission on all the aspects of the system. So it became very clear that we really needed somebody that would kind of step into a research director role and kind of oversee and also help our other researchers on staff. When I started in the agency, we had one researcher. With Ken's addition, he brought us up to 4, and we will be hiring another one shortly. So we will be up to a research staff of 5, which is quite formidable as research staffs go in the state. So we do great work. Ken comes from North Carolina. He can tell you a little bit more about himself, but he was excited to come out to Oregon and join us. And he's heading up our STOP data project, which he is on the agenda a little bit later to talk more about. So that's Ken. And then Rita comes from more locally. Rita heads up our specialty court program. Previously, you'll recall that Chris Thomas was in that role. Chris went on to go work for Gobi, and so she's working with the behavioral health CCO out in Eastern Oregon now. So we were extremely fortunate and recruited Rita heavily for this position when we found out that she might be available for it. She has a background of working in specialty courts here in Marion County. So she brings that to the table. She's our new quickly learning expert on specialty courts across the state. So I know that she's already had some conversations with Commissioner Tapia about veterans courts, and so she's quickly getting up to speed with what the state looks like. So 2 new faces of staff for the commission. I just wanted you to welcome them, and if you see them, to say hey. Oh, John, are you new? Have I not introduced you? Well, you'll hear from John today. He's a very important member of the staff too. John has actually been on staff now since end of October, John? Yes. Yeah. So John was brought on by the passage of Senate Bill 1041, which is the bill that has requested our agency to track all the alcohol and drug treatment dollars across our state system. And then also to start looking at outcomes and putting together a report for the state, which is come due in September of 2019. Boy, 2019. So John that's his entire job, is to work on that report. It's a limited duration position. He's really just an assassin brought in for that one issue. And so he spends and devotes all his time to that. And so he has a little space on the agenda today too to update you all on exactly what progress he's made so far. So yeah, a lot of staff changes. Welcome aboard.
Welcome, everyone. So the next item on the agenda is a vice chair for this commission. I remembered when I took my board and commission test that I had to take, when joining this for the state, I actually kind of paid attention. I wrote some notes down. So one of the things is that we should have a vice chair in case something happens to me. I can't perform for any reason. So I just wanted to get that out there. And if anybody has an interest in being the vice chair of the commission, please get in contact with me, and if no one does, I'll probably reach out to some of you as well. And we can figure out a process to get that done. But I just wanted to bring that up and put that in everybody's mind that we'd like to do that. Hopefully nothing happens to me. When I first told Mike I went on the agenda, he was like, "Is something wrong? Are you going somewhere?" And I was like, "No, I'm just trying to abide by the state law, do everything correctly." So if that's an interest to anybody, please get in touch with me, and we could, put the names forward. And it's really up to the commission to vote on that. But I'd like to have some names put forward, and I can send out an email to everybody or have the staff do it, and then we can all vote on vice chair. So please get in touch. Okay, next is an update on the burn jag, and I'm going to have Mike, because the legislative session is done now, give us a quick update on the legislative front.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to give you all just an update on where we are with the federal burn jag grant that the CJC administers. As you all are aware, we were contacted by the U.S. Department of Justice and asked about our compliance with the federal law 1373 in terms of cooperating with immigration. And so most recently, they sent us a letter asking us for documents proving or specifying how it is what our relationship is. I sent the letter that I responded to the US DOJ, BJA, out to the commission, so happy to talk more about that. But essentially, we continue to let them know and iterate that we are in compliance with federal law. We do cooperate and do not prevent the sharing of information with immigration officials. And we turned over any policies, emails, or anything else that would speak to that in the possession of state agencies. As you all know, as commissioners on the CJC does not set policy in the state along those lines. We do not direct agencies, other state agencies, on how it is that they are to communicate with immigration. It's not our role in the system. So the commission staff had no emails or policies or anything else in our possession that would have spoken to the request by US DOJ. But nevertheless, we did reach out to our other state agencies and partners and ask them to comply and to give us what they had that would be responsive to that request. And so we sent that along. I have not received a response from them up to this point, but when I do so, I'm sure you'll probably know as soon as I do, because it tends to find its way to the papers before I even get the letter. But so I'm happy to answer any questions or talk offline on that issue if there's anything from commissioners.
So I'm going to take the time. So I don't have any questions, Executive Director Schmidt, but thank you for your professional kind of lean-in attitude as it relates to the inquiry by the federal government. Please keep, as you've done up to this point, continue to keep us apprised. If you need anything, let us know. If you need anything that my office, as it relates to the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, if you need anything from me as an individual outside of this commission, let me know, please. Thank you.
Any other commissioners have any comments? Okay, and after the legislative update, we're going to flip the order here and have Mike give the update on the victimization survey as well. So go ahead and do the legislative update, then the victimization survey.
Great, thank you. Happy surprise this weekend, the legislature sine-died on Saturday. It's always nice to come into work on Monday and see that's ended, so that was great. Just want to give an update to the commission on some legislation that impacts the work that we do that came out. So I'll start off with Senate Bill 1544, which was, and Rob can talk, Commissioner Bobette can talk a lot more about this than I can, but it was kind of a bigger, broader bill around cannabis and marijuana fixes. But what impacts the CJC is that they established an illegal marijuana enforcement program and asked the CJC to administer those funds and give those funds to counties that are experiencing a need for additional law enforcement, district attorneys for prosecution, where overproduction or exporting is happening in the state. So it's not a huge amount of money at this point, but we received a position to help administer that, which is greatly appreciated, which will help out our agency resources quite a bit. So we will be starting a rulemaking process. We will lean heavily on Commissioner Bobette for his expertise in rule writing and get that going. The bill, I think, begins around June 1st is when our position comes online. I think it starts like 91 days after the passage of session. So that was a big program for us, or it's not as big of a program, but it adds a new responsibility that we haven't had before, but it allows us to handle resources out to the state.
Could you let everybody know what the dollar amount was?
So it's $1.5 million per year until 2024. I view it as a pilot project. So I basically stole a bill from Colorado, reads almost identically. I plagiarized from it. Colorado is getting $6 million a year toward this, but the reason we only got 1.5, I explain real briefly. For the past few years, the Oregon Liquor Control Commission has been skimming $5 million per year off the top of state marijuana tax revenues. That's to ramp up their operations, because Measure 91 gave them a whole new program, operations, investigations, enforcement, the whole deal. Now that they are receiving substantial monies by license fees, that frees up about 30% of that, about $1.5 million per year. So I started wanting a much larger program, and the legislature was not into doing that in a short session. So the best I could do was basically take that part of the skim that's now freed up. But it's in statute now, and I'm hoping that even more gets freed up in the future, and I'm hoping the legislature sees that we need to put more money into it in the future. This is a major federal concern that United States Attorney Billy Williams has expressed to us. I did use the language out of Colorado, which does target rural areas with high production and high diversion and little law enforcement, i.e., for example, Southern Oregon. And so we really do need to use this money wisely and target it. It's competitive. I'm going to be encouraging our members, for example, to glom together. So maybe we could see one application from Josephine and Jackson counties and the cities in them. We really need to use this money as best we can. It's really only amounts to about $1.25 million per year because, as Mike said, we have to pay for the staffing and all that stuff in CJC. So this is vital that we are able to show the United States Department of Justice that we actually are taking their concerns seriously and doing something about it. But it is just a start.
Will there be a process that where it's worked before, where they'll have to come before the CJC to request the funds, almost like the grant process?
It is, and so starting next Monday, I'll start crafting our draft rules, and I'll share with Mike and share with everybody, just like we did for the last. I crafted the JRI rules before that, and way back in 2005, I crafted rules for the drug court program. So I'm just using the same model, just tweaking it. This will be competitive, so there's no formula, and we're going to have to probably make some hard decisions about how we can best use this money to show the feds a big impact. It can fund not just investigators, law enforcement, it can fund prosecutors as well. So we'll need to look systemically at the grant applications.
Thank you. Any questions? Questions? Okay.
Great. So next on the legislative bills that affect CJC, as you all aware, or probably all aware, commissioners, there has been a lawsuit around House Bill 3078 that was passed in 2017. The reason that affects the Criminal Justice Commission is because in that bill, we received a grant for $7 million to enhance and to help establish downward departure programs that focus on property and drug offenders. And so we allocated that $7 million, or at least earmarked the $7 million, half of it's out the door already, to 12 different counties that applied for that money. And the question about whether or not House Bill 3078 is constitutional is what is at the heart of that lawsuit. Now, nobody disputes that the grant program itself runs afoul of any constitutional provision, but it is in a bill that has been found by several courts at this point to be unconstitutional. So the risk and the question was, well, if the entire bill is overturned as unconstitutional, then the CJC would no longer have the statutory authority to continue to administer that grant, and it could impede us from being able to send those funds out to the counties that we had already promised and earmarked those funds for. So with the help of some allies and friends in the building and some quick work in this session, we were able to get a fix, which essentially just reconstitutes just the grant program, no other aspect of that legislation, into the programmatic bill at the end of session. So now there is not going to be any concern about the CJC statutory authority, because it is now a standalone grant program that is not tied to the fate of House Bill 3078. Also, at the same time, but in a different bill, a different legislative amendment was put into the crime omnibus bill. I don't have the number in front of me, that would essentially ask the Supreme Court to take jurisdiction over that issue immediately and get an answer to whether or not House Bill 3078 is unconstitutional as soon as they possibly can, which would be great for the state, who some counties are following the law, some counties have challenged the law and are no longer operating under that law because findings have made they're unconstitutional. So we are in a situation where, depending on what county you're in, will determine what sentencing structure you're sentenced under. Which obviously is not a great position for a criminal justice system to be in, to have different people treated differently depending on where they're at. So the fact that that was put into a bill and the Supreme Court hopefully will be taking that up as soon as possible, we think is a real positive.
And just to amplify on that, why it's important that we get the Supreme Court to expedite the review is we'll have people actually serving repo sentences, repeat property offender sentences, that may be sentenced to too long constitutionally, and we need to know that before they, cross over into something that is an unconstitutional length of sentence. So we need the Supremes to answer ultimately fairly rapidly.
There was a bill that it had to do with asset forfeiture. The major part of the bill, in House Bill 4056, was around establishing funds for family and children of fallen officers. so that they could access scholarship funds and things of that nature. But in that bill also was essentially a fix for our commission on how we use the asset forfeitures specialty court funds. As the commission knows, right now we use that money and we pass it through directly to specialty courts. We tweak the language a little bit to say that the CJC shall use it to support specialty courts. What that enables us to do is use those funds to support our procurement of a statewide specialty court case management system, which you'll hear a little bit more about today. But that enables us to provide that to the state, have ongoing maintenance costs come from the asset forfeiture so that we know that we have a sustainable source of funds. And we're making that system available to all specialty courts across the state, not just the ones that we fund. Because we fund about 41, I think, at last count. And there are about 70 across the state, so we don't fund them all. We're still going to make this case management system available to everybody. So we're really excited about that. Been working close with OJD, the Oregon Drug Court professionals. My staff, of course, Tiffany and Rita have been working on it quite a bit. So we're really excited about that project. And this fix will enable us to have a certainty around those maintenance funds. So it was a big deal for us, even though it's a small little tweak. Other than that, in terms of legislation, we will be coming back to you with rules around ranking a couple bills. There was a hit and run bill, a hit and run loophole fix bill that passed, and a strangulation bill. So we will be coming to you to rank those. I know that the strangulation bill already directs the CJC to rank it at certain levels, crime seriousness level. I'm not sure about the hit and run bill. I'll have to look at that, and it would be whether or not it changes. But just to put that on your radar, that we will be bringing those back to you. And last and not least, in terms of updates, the CJC received a grant from Council of State Governments to work on bringing a summit to the state that focuses on behavioral health and public safety. So right now we are planning for to have a summit where we get public safety and health people together in the room. We're working with DPSST. They're providing us the space, and Gobi is providing us some funds so that we can provide travel cost reimbursements to people who have to come from far places to attend. But we're going to have a day-long summit to look at public health and public safety in a kind of more holistic way, and consider what we can do as a state to improve those things. Those are all the updates on legislator and what's going on.
Any questions about that? Okay, let's move on to the victimization survey update.
Okay. This entire agenda is not just me talking. So victimization survey update. So as many of you know, because I've either had conversations with you or because you've read through all the attachments that went out in our canceled meeting, so you're probably primed on this issue. We kind of ran into a snag in terms of what our plans were to go forward with the survey. And that surrounded a few things really as it came out. But one of the things was asking questions about an offender's race and whether or not the victimization survey was an appropriate place to have those questions. The other was a survey sample size issue, because as we were looking at it, the survey sample for the second round, the way that we had the survey designed got to be some pretty small numbers. And so it's raised a lot of questions for us about, is the current way that we have this survey set up and developed the best way for us to go forward. At the same time, the researcher who was heading up that issue, or that project for the CJC, had submitted her resignation. So Dr. Ann Lehman will be leaving the agency. And what that does for us as staff is we have a lot of other projects going on, as you're going to hear about in the rest of this agenda. And so we really don't have the bandwidth or capacity at this time to take on some of those questions, those threshold questions that we need to answer in terms of moving forward with the survey right now. So you all, as the commission, voted on allocating $200,000 of 2016 burn JAG towards the victimization survey for us to do that. We have spent some of that money in preparation, and I think some of that work will still be able to be used later on. But at this time, we no longer have the staff capacity to shepherd that program. So what I ask for all of you is, if you're okay with us hitting the pause button for now, we can come back and revisit that victimization survey issue once we are staffed back up to where we need to be, and once we have some answers to some of those threshold questions about the offender race questions and whether or not to include those in sample size, and are there ways for us to enhance the sample size and come at this a different way. So I wanted to bring this back to you because you all had voted on us moving forward with this, and at this time, we're not able to do that.
So I think what we need to, one thing that we might want to clarify is how long are you talking about? If it's 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever that may be, and does our old vote continue to stay in effect to, so you have the funds when you take it back up again?
Yeah, so I think realistically, we are right now posting 2 research positions, and so that will take a few months to onboard them. We have several other projects that are going to be pressing. I think it's realistic for us to return to the victimization survey about this time next year. I think we're looking at about a 1-year pause by the time that we are able to devote some resource to looking into those questions. We'll also be competing with the long session at that time, so that adds quite a bit of workload to our agency. So I think a year is a realistic time frame for us to come back and tackle those things. Your vote in terms of the JAG allocated resources still stands. We would still use that same money, and the JAG funds have to be spent within 4 years. So we had it allocated on 2016 JAG. We still have, we'll still be well within the 4-year window to accomplish that project. So your vote stands in terms of that. So really, as long as everyone's okay with that plan, I don't think a vote needs to change it.
Does anybody have any discussion about that?
Yeah, I have no objection to what's being proposed, but in reading this survey, I noticed some questions of victims as to the race or ethnic origin of the offender, and it dawned on me that I did not see anywhere where the victims were asked to identify their own race or ethnicity. And it seems to me that that data would be worth gathering along with the offender data for whenever this gets done.
Any other questions or comments?
I was just going to comment, if we make the determination that it's scientifically or statistically valid to even inquire of that, I would agree with you, Greg. We should get it.
That was based on that assumption. Thank you, Commissioner.
I also share with Mike my own personal feelings that, as Greg talked about, the credibility of the CJC has increased over the years. The most important thing to me was that if there's any question about the data, that we just get the science right. And that for me personally, my view is that I'm not afraid to ask any question as long as it's a valid question and we use the correct sample sizes, because, we're the arbiters, or our job is to get good data out there, and the policymakers can take that data and do what they will with it. But I don't want to not ask questions for any particular reason or another if they mean something to, potential solutions. And so I think that for me, taking some amount of pause to get it right and make sure it's right puts us in the right position to maintain our credibility. The one question I had is, would the victim, the people that support the rights of victims, will this give them any kind of heartburn if you wait 12 full months? And I want to be mindful of that view.
So I can answer both of those questions. Commissioner Hazarbeedian, the way that this survey is being proposed at this point, and we're going to have to relook at this, but it was proposed in kind of a 2-stage process. Stage 1, you'd ask the demographic questions of the victim, and then stage 2 would be if they select themselves to be followed up with, then you would ask the questions that you saw. So we would definitely be capturing victim demographic information. Absolutely is a key component of the survey. In terms of the victims community, I took over, as I said, in this position a little over 3 years ago now, and even before that happened, I had people coming to me saying the CJC needs to do a victimization survey. So this has been a constant request from multiple communities, victimization groups, law enforcement community. I think a lot of people are really want to know how Oregon stacks up on this. So I think they will, I think there'll be some disappointment for sure that we can't proceed right at this moment. But to your point, Chair Ball, I think getting it right and making sure that we are absolutely on rock solid ground in the questions that we ask and our methodology in surveying people, and that we get appropriate responses so that we can have statistically valid information is time and money well spent to make sure that we do it the right way the first time. So I think they would also agree with that sentiment as well.
Chair Ball, quick comment.
Yes.
Executive Director Schmidt. Well, first, Executive Director Schmidt, thank you for, I do feel that I've been kept apprised both by virtue of the materials that were sent out in our canceled meeting. I was able to review those in anticipation of the meeting, and then since that time, an update, as you summarized here, about the, from a capacity standpoint, just sheer resources available with the leaving of the office, the assigned researcher. So as a practical matter, it makes perfect sense. And I was listening carefully to the use of the words pause and delay, and not elimination or not moving away from. So relative to the pause, delay, I think those are well chosen and careful, and I'm going to hold you to them and what it means really, and I think we're all saying the same thing, and that is the victimization survey will be done. We just can't do it. Your agency just can't do it right now. And so as a result, it's understandable. There is a degree of interest that translates into urgency, because interest is there for a reason. There is a degree of urgency for all of us to understand, as we are, if you will, students of our profession in the area of public safety. We're interested in the outcomes, what this is going to tell us. So thank you for the agency's continued interest.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Oh, I thought I heard something. Thank you for pointing out it wasn't you. I thought it was you.
All right.
Okay, moving on, we are now going to go to the Crime Victims Portal update from Denise Pina and Annie Nguyen.
Good afternoon. We're supposed to push the button.
Yeah, the red light will go on. There you go.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Denise Pena, and I am the manager of the Victim Services Unit for the Department of Community Justice in Multnomah County.
Good afternoon. I'm Annie Nguyen. I'm the program supervisor for the Multnomah County District Attorney's Victim Assistance Program.
And we do have a PowerPoint up. I apologize for the date. We got snowed out. Air quotes, snowed out on the day, so we are a little bit delayed. And we're here to speak to you all about Case Companion, which is a public website currently available for victims of Multnomah County. And I will talk a little bit about how we came here, where the steps are at, and then hopefully where we're going in the near future. So this work actually began back in 2014. At that point, DCJ, my department, along with the Parole Board and the Department of Corrections, requested and received technical assistance from NIC, which is the National Institute of Corrections. And at that point, we were really trying to focus on where victims' rights post-conviction. So the three agencies that requested the TA request are work in the post-conviction field, where there's just not a lot of resources, information regarding victims' rights post-conviction. We received the request, and that resulted in a mapping meeting that took place in Salem, and we had representation from community-based advocates, victims' rights attorneys, Department of Corrections, Parole Board, and also community corrections. And we really kind of did this big mapping project when an offender is sentenced to prison. How does that person move through the system, and the opportunities that a victim might not be notified or aware of what actually is happening that could potentially impact the sentence that the victim believes from what they heard in court. Also, as a part of that mapping, NIC paid for a small group. The Underhill was a part of that group with myself and Scott Taylor. We got to go to Minnesota in February, where we were able to look at what's called Minnesota Choice, which is the system that they have within their DOC program. So it was at that Minnesota site visit that this vision of the eyeball was originated. And so essentially the focus of this project, like I mentioned, was post-conviction. Victim advocacy tends to be very front-loaded, typically at the DA's office or maybe in the community-based advocates. But as an offender moves through the post-conviction part of our system, which is for the most part the less known and most confusing to a lot of people, the reality is that those crime victims are not going to have a ton of support because there are not a lot of victims assistance staff in those agencies. And so the eyeball was what our group kind of came up with. This is how we'll help fix this problem, is that if we have one centralized place post-conviction that a victim can go to be able to access their information. And so as we moved on, our group expanded. I already mentioned DA Rod Underhill's office, as well as DOC, DCJ, the parole board, and then we also have the support of NCVLI, which is the National Crime Victims Law Institute. They are a nonprofit that we're fortunate to have based out of Portland, Oregon. So we have their involvement as well as sort of that centralized victim-centered agency. And so in 2016, we learned of a group called Code for America. They are a nonprofit based out of the Bay Area, and they have a fellowship program where they partner with government agencies all over the country to help solve a problem by leveraging technology, which is their area of expertise. And so at that time, what we call the Multnomah County Five, which were the agencies I just mentioned, applied for the Code for America grant, and we were selected under their safety and justice. And the problem that we presented to them, again, was this victims' rights post-conviction. Victims don't have a lot of information and resources available to them to help them navigate the system, because for the victim, it's not just going to end at conviction as the offender moves on. And so just very briefly, we need to give credit to Pam, Zeneva, and Tom Dooner. They were the designer and the engineer that Code for America placed to be a part of this project. They did not have prior experience, professionally or personally, with victimization, the criminal justice system, so they had a lot to learn, but they were going to come help us solve this problem. And so as part of the Code for America project, they spent 3 weeks in Portland, Oregon last March, essentially learning our system and trying to learn what our problem is and what they've been brought on to help solve. And so they spoke with a lot of people, not just in the agencies that I mentioned. They spoke with victims' rights attorneys, they spoke with survivors more importantly, because Code for America, they're building for the user, and in our project, the user is going to be the crime victim that's going to go through our system. And so after the 3 weeks in residency, understanding that we had a big gap for them to help fill, we had to start somewhere. And the part that was identified was those offenders that end up going to the Department of Corrections. So even though we knew that in terms of the number of offenders and victims, that was going to be a smaller number of victims we were going to impact, when we spoke to them and learned about what we called pain points, that was a more painful point for victims, because it was when those offenders were sentenced to DOC that victims we heard the terminology of the DOC black hole, which is the person went to prison and I now know nothing. The DA's office did a great job keeping me informed of the case and what was going to happen. And now that they've been sentenced to prison, I don't know what the next steps are, and I don't know who to call. So that was the area that we started with. And also the way that Code for America works is that instead of just building a product, going away after a year and then coming back with a finished product, they're going to start doing iterations and building and testing to find out, to make sure that we are on the right track. And so again, we started off with that DOC portion of it. And so that resulted in the formation or the creation of Case Companion, which is the website that we're going to talk to all of you now. So what I ended up doing was just taking screenshots, but the website is live and active, and we can certainly send the link out if you want to go to the website and take a look yourself. And essentially now, Case Companion is going to provide victims with an FAQ section, just general questions that somebody might have regarding how the criminal justice system works and maybe something that they can expect. They have the ability to look up an offender, whether they're in prison or now if they're under community supervision as well. Again, currently it's Multnomah County specific. And more importantly, even though we're getting the information off DOC's public website, which a victim may or may not know is there, We're just giving them additional information that they would currently be able to get on the website, such as giving somebody a notice that the projected release date might change. And then there's a drop-down box that might list some ways that that might change. The website, again, is all public information that we're gathering data from. It is not case-specific to that particular victim, or at least giving them a heads up that there are some programming that may happen in DOC that could impact somebody's sentence. And then more importantly, it's going to connect them to the right person that they should actually talk to if they have questions. In this particular case, as you see on the screen, we have Robin Marcella. She is the victim advocate for the parole board. We have Sadie DeRosia. She is the victim specialist for DOC. And if a victim or anybody were to do the drop-down button, you would have their contact information, both via email and phone number. And more importantly, it's going to tell them, this is what Sadie can answer my questions about. And if I have these kind of questions, then I'm going to go over and speak with Robin about that.
Kenya, can I interrupt you with a kind of a question up to this point? Because I think this is a good point to have at least update these folks about how we funded this aspect. And what I mean by that is you've covered a lot of groundwork, a lot of foundational work, but how was it done, right, from a funding standpoint? So it was a matching grant, if you will, with Code for America. And who matched, what were the agencies that contributed really literally funds in order to get us to where you are right here?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Underhill. At this point, the funding, the partners, the Multnomah County 5 had to come up with $250,000, and those contributions were received from the DA's office, from DCJ, and then from DOC, which was came through CJC.
So as I understand it, right, the Department of Corrections was not able to contribute despite their desire to, and we then moved over to this body, the Criminal Justice Commission, to seek supporting funding for it.
That is correct.
Right. And so matching grant from Code for America and then system partners from around the state, right, so to speak, DCJ, MCDA, CJC here, and then philosophical support, because there were brackets relative to DOC being able to contribute up to this point. Is that fair to say?
That is right.
Okay. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Of course.
If I could just supplement that, Commissioners, you will recall, I believe we voted on this. It was a burn jag allocation. I think it was maybe a year and a half ago at this point. But it was $100,000 that you all voted to help support this project when the Department of Corrections found out that they could not financially support it. So we used some of our innovative federal burn jag funds. This is another example of the way that we use those funds in Oregon to support this, with the idea that if in Multnomah County they could figure this out and really kind of get it to where it's working, the eventual would be a build out that could be scaled up statewide that would be available to anybody else. So at the time, the conversation amongst the commission was help them get what they need to, the seed money they need to meet the matching grant requirements. And then if they can make it work in Multnomah County, we can help and continue to work with them to scale it up so that statewide, the vision is, which I'm sure you'll hear more about, that victims will have access to this resource.
Thank you. And so just moving on to the presentation, if the offender is then sentenced to community supervision in Multnomah County, Chelsea Penning is our victim advocate at DCJ. You'll see her little picture there. And again, we're letting the victim know who the PO is, who the advocate is. And then as I mentioned, the drop-down boxes, these are all the questions or concerns or resources that Chelsea will be able to give to you. The way that they really were able to build it is not uncommon for a victim to get the runaround, which is they just start calling numbers or Googling to try to find out information about their case or what they can expect. And very well-intended people who are not the ones to best answer the questions will just give them more phone numbers and unintentionally just create the runaround for the victim and just make their process even more frustrating. And so with Case Companion, we really are truly trying to link that victim to that person that can best answer their questions or concerns. Before I pass it on to Annie, I would just say that this may seem very simplistic, that we would have offender information readily available to victims about their case, but that really is not the reality for victims. And it's not just specific to Multnomah County or even the state of Oregon. but just even nationally.
So in the process of building and trying out different iterations and seeking feedback, both from the users, the victims of crime themselves, and then also the various service providers, we learned a lot along the way. And I think one of the biggest takeaways was exactly this point, that the onus, the responsibility of the victim to understand who they needed to call, to seek information, to have a clear understanding about what their rights are, have a clear orientation to the criminal justice system, and how they can play meaningful role, was really on the victim to be able to have an understanding of the language and to know who the appropriate person was to ask. And in victim services, we talk all day long about what does your support system look like. And so we hit this point probably at 2/3 of the way into our project development, in which we thought, you know, the best support system is one that comes to the victim as opposed to having the victim trying to seek that out. So what we decided to do at that point was to really build backwards into the prosecution process. So what that looked like was, Case Companion was this visible, physical representation in this website that victims could access. But there's so much more in terms of their meaningful engagement and understanding of the system that we decided to take a few steps back and look into prosecution. So when a victim comes into the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, either a grand jury or preliminary hearings now, they meet with a victim advocate and they have an opportunity to fill out their victim's rights notification form. Now, this form can be confusing. It's not necessarily written in language that is super accessible to victims, depending on their language abilities and understanding what we know about a victim at that time, especially if they've never experienced interactions with the system before. It can be overwhelming, it can be anxiety-producing, and it can be really scary. And our form doesn't necessarily do a whole lot to make them feel better when it's filled with legalese. The victim advocate is walking them through this form in a helpful way, but oftentimes right before they're going in to testify, perhaps to confront the defendant for the first time since the crime has occurred. So the fellows took this form and they visualized it, which made it really easily accessible for the victim to access it at any point. It could be at the time of grand jury or preliminary hearing. It could be beforehand if that served them better, or it could be after when they had a chance to really digest what they experienced and seek more information and clarification. The language is very straightforward, and we consulted with a lot of trauma experts to make sure that it was at a level that they could understand and process accordingly. So now they can do this online, and after they process their victim's rights form, then it automatically triggers an email receipt that goes back to the victim and helps them to understand what they have. Currently, they don't get a copy of their victim's rights form. That might be the only time in their entire process that they're having direct access and contact with this hard copy form. But we know that victims' rights goes well beyond just that initial phase, and they're, have victims' rights in post-conviction, and it's currently, on the victim to be able to reiterate that information again and again to all these various partners that they might interact with. But this system, as it currently stands, has so much possibility to build that out, and so the victim is able to share that information one time, and it's then on the onus of the system partners to be able to communicate with each other moving forward, taking that pressure and responsibility off of the victim. So this is what they get, a copy of their request. They have an opportunity to go back and make any edits or amend it at any time. If they decide that, at the time perhaps they weren't interested in receiving rights in a certain area, but then they decide later on that that is something that is interesting to them, especially as we hit the post-conviction phase and they might want additional notification around events or information from certain parties. This system also has the possibility of creating ongoing notification systems. So our office is great about providing, calls and in-person connections with these victims during the stage, but as Denise pointed out earlier, oftentimes once they cease contact with our office at, the close of the case, then there is a myriad of people that they may or may not know that they can contact. But by initiating contact with this system, Case Companion, at an earlier stage, it helps to the victim to have awareness around the fact that these resources and that these people exist. It's really a one-stop shop, and that they only need to go to one place in order to access all this information, and they're familiar with it. So this is the tool that sits with them throughout the entirety of their training for the criminal justice system, whether their case is in the DA's office or it's in any post-conviction So really, our goal is to make the system simple and respectful and supportive, and bring that support system to the victim during their entirety of their experience with the criminal justice system, regardless of the jurisdiction. So that's where we're at now. We are really excited about the things that we're doing in Multnomah County. We think that it's revolutionary. You know, to our knowledge, it's the only type of system that's happening nationwide, and so the possibilities really are endless and what we can build out here. But unfortunately, a victim only has access to information as it relates to Multnomah County at present time. So if a defendant is being supervised in Multnomah County and then transfers out of county, then unfortunately that means the victim's access totally ceases at that point. And it would be a shame to think that somebody is becoming familiar with this tool, really becoming to rely on the tool. We heard from victims post-conviction in doing some of the victim information interviews that they sat down with this tool and learned more about their case in the 3 minutes they spent with the fellows than they had in all of the years, you know, trying to Google things or contact people on their own. So that, I mean, it's just one small example of how invaluable this tool could be, that unfortunately could very quickly go away should that defendant not be supervised in Multnomah County anymore. So we're working within our county and with our statewide partners with an effort to build out this program. And we're really excited about all of the future things that are looking for a variety of resources, both within our county and outside of our county, to make sure that this vision really can reach a statewide level. Any questions?
Any questions?
So first off, I really appreciate the idea of having a one-stop location where the victim can get detailed information. I'm curious if the program as it's devised right now is victim organized or offender organized. In other words, would that victim be able to see all of the past supervisions and past convictions of a person who had victimized them? And the second question I have is concerning updating changing conditions. So say, for instance, probation officer changes. How quickly do you expect that information would be updated to your system?
As far as, I'll take the second question first. Currently, the Case Companion website is not pushing any information out. And so if the PO were to change and the victim were to go check, then the change would be there, and the data gets updated every day because it's communicating with our Doc 400 system. But the Code for America grant, which I should have mentioned, ended in October of last year. And so we unfortunately lost the expertise of Pam and Tom, but before they left, there was still a list of features that this could be expanded to. So the Case Companion website that you see today, I do not believe to be the finished product, and not just because it's Multnomah County specific. And so it has the potential to grow in every direction. For the first part, it's offender and case specific. And anything on the website is going to be public information. And so it's not specific to that, necessarily to that case. But there's been discussions down the road where if we make it more case specific, and if a victim had a PIN number, for example, to access to get more information, like that is a possibility. We're just not quite there yet. At this point, anything is a possibility.
Any other questions or comments?
So the first part of Sebastian's question, Commissioner Taffy's question about criminal history, is that something that would be available to a victim if they were logging into this website of the offender?
No. So at present time, if you log in to search for the offender, then the information provided is where the offender is at present moment, and or if they're on supervision, who is their direct contact is for that supervision, related both to the PO and for victim services. And then there's also a variety of different links so they can access that additional information, you know, whatever specifically they're looking for. But as in terms of what's pulled up on the website, it's just the location of where the offender is.
So if you forgot the name of the offender, and you're a victim, you can look it up by your own self.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can look it up by SID number and by offender name.
So what's the future hold for this?
Chair Ball, thank you. So part of this is I'm gonna try and walk between the answering questions while actually asking our panelists to really try and ask questions to help answer those, because I have an awareness that is a little more in depth than some of the other commissioners here. So next steps, I think that's an important part about really fleshing that out from the two of you more than from me sitting up here. So first, thank you both for your continued kind of obsession with getting this program not just to where it is, but the next vision. So the next steps, I think, Commissioner Tapia, one of your questions kind of flushed out this notion of right now, we haven't advanced, and we haven't advanced from a technical standpoint relative to design of Case Companion since about October, right? Just from a simple, I'm going to call it an IT standpoint. Is that right? Despite the knowledge between our ears and desire to move that forward, we're at a funding gap right now. Is that also fair to say?
Yes.
So, can I interject just a question that may go into that? The thing that was going through my head was, would this fit into the case management system built statewide? Or is that more off the shelf?
The drug court case management system. It would be different. Yeah, it'd be a little bit different.
So relative to quite literally some of the next steps, Ms. Pena and Ms. Nguyen, about a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, we convened a meeting of stakeholders in the Department of Community Justice's office. Is that right?
Yes.
One of the visions for that was to both explore executive director status, right? We had a robust conversation surrounding all the system partners that you mentioned. Director Colette Peters was there, Executive Director Schmidt was there, Scott Taylor from their office and beyond. And essentially, I don't mean to leave anybody off, there were several other folks there, but we established an executive board, if you will, of these stakeholders surrounding a commitment to want to further Case Companion beyond where it sits today, because there's a lot more work that needs to be done before it's ready for replication around the state, right?
Yes.
One of the things that was discussed was the necessity of relative to funding and just the practicality of needing to maintain what we have and begin the next series of builds over the next even 12-month period of time. And is it fair to say that myself, taking off my commissioner hat for a moment, right, as the district attorney of Multnomah County, together with Denise, your boss, Scott Taylor, the director of community justice in Multnomah County, both committed their agencies to doing what we could relative to us continuing funding as we move forward. But we had conversations with other system partners. I'm going to use the phrase passing the hat, right, to see if there were continued interest or ability to contribute to the broader vision that you've outlined. And so those conversations ongoing, fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. So if the need over the next, from say, the fiscal years are broken up, of course, we all know July 1st through June 30th. From the July 1st to June 30th of next year, what is your office, I'm looking at you, Ms. Pena, because it's your office that has supplied the most meaningful kind of, what do we need for that next 12-month period of time from a resource standpoint to continue the work on Case Companion?
So currently we have Tom Duder, who is the engineer, our Code for America fellow. He is a temporary employee on call, so if the website were to go down, we do have somebody available to help fix it. He built it. But as District Attorney General mentioned, it's sort of been on pause or on hold since October when our grant ended. The information that we received from County Central IT is that it's going to take approximately $180,000 to hire a team of developers to continue the work. And so if we think of it as in phases, so phase one being the Code for America project, which is concluded and it took us to where we're at now. Phase two would potentially be to fine tune the features that are currently there, the ones that we have expressed, that might be a good idea. And then moving down to three, potentially adding in that first county and then having to work out the IT challenges to how to actually make that work. And then phase four, a little bit further down the line, being a system that eventually could go statewide. And so at this point, our departments are having conversations about how do we fund $180,000 for the developers to continue the work that's already been done.
Commissioner Underhill, if I can briefly, just a little bit of background. Like Commissioner said, I was invited to come down and to sit in this meeting to represent the commission in the fact that you all have already made an investment, a substantial investment into this program. And so the ask from them was for us to continue to be involved, which we already have Commissioner Underhill, both in his role locally as the district attorney, but also as a commissioner, is very involved in this. But they asked if I'd be willing to continue to sit on the board to represent your interests in the commission, which I happily agreed to do. They also asked if we would be willing as a commission to financially continue to support this project. And so, I did not make any commitments on your behalf, but I certainly said that it is something that you all would probably be willing to consider and to take up. And so I just put that out to you all as a possibility that I know, as Ms. Pena has already identified, there is a continued need for resources, and locally they are trying to fund those. But we would potentially be able to continue to support this project a little more if the commission desired to continue doing that, with the end goal, of course, that the outcome will have statewide benefit, because that is what is required of us to make investments of our federal JAG dollars.
So is there a formal proposal that will come our way with respect to that, or how would that flesh out?
Yeah, certainly we could either at a future meeting set time for a formal proposal. I think at this point we certainly could discuss it if there was a willingness for the commission wanting to look at financially supporting. I think we have the ability to contribute financially from 2016 Burn JAG awards. So it's certainly within the realm of possibility. So we could either bring it back or even have the discussion now if the commission would like.
Just from so if I may, Chair, because I'm so intricately intertwined with this project, it's probably most appropriate for me to both continue the dialogue, but recuse myself from a commissioner standpoint, or at least for consideration, or recuse myself from voting on the financial aspect. I certainly wouldn't want any impropriety to occur or the appearance of impropriety. So with that understanding, I'd like to maybe move then into, as the Multnomah County District Attorney, aspect of at least teasing up some of the notion that Executive Director Schmidt has mentioned. So there is, so with that understanding, okay, to continue to chat a little bit about it. So the Department of Community Justice, I've mentioned Scott Taylor, myself as District Attorney in Multnomah County. We are continuing to have conversations. It is our budget session because we're on the fiscal year that I mentioned. So we are having each of us, different conversations with the chair of Multnomah County to try and properly resource this program. We could use assistance, no doubt. So the conversation is a little bit front and center for us. We could, if chosen, delay it for our next commission meeting, but it is a very ripe conversation for us relative to how do we continue this program. And we're talking about that very thing as we speak. So with that thought in mind, amongst ourselves, we've had a ask of $20,000 of continued contribution by CJC to go toward that $180,000 invoice, if you will, over the next 12 months in order for us to endeavor upon and then complete, quote unquote, phase 2, as has been referenced by Ms. Pena.
Any other commissioner thoughts about the presentation? And I would also obviously entertain any motions.
So I would,
Commissioner Bobette.
I would make a motion, but I would say very impressive. We need this statewide yesterday. So we need to continue down this path for the steps we've outlined. So I would, put on the table a motion to authorize staff to allocate up to $20,000 of 2016 burn jag funds for this specific purpose.
Would I have a second to that, and then we can get into discussion and thoughts? Any other discussion
Is there a second?
there? Second from you, Commissioner.
I didn't want to have a comment. I didn't know.
Oh, go ahead.
So in thinking forward to phase 4, where it can be a statewide resource, could you explain what the steps would be towards, well, you're still in the development phase, about bringing in other counties' inputs? I mean, from my perspective, it looks like a smart program, well thought out, but I'm not intimately involved in the day-to-day to really know how other counties might use it or might not want to use it. What are you doing to incorporate other specific counties' needs?
The one thing that I would point out is that the way that Code for America built it, it really was based on the needs of the users and not the needs of the department. And so I hope that as we move forward, that we don't lose sight that this is a business-centered tool. There have been discussions about engaging other counties, but that hasn't actually happened yet because at this point, we're not quite sure what the next steps are going to be, but those discussions have been made. I know that Washington County at one point expressed some interest, but at that point, it's just in conversations. Nothing actually has been done because the decision was made to keep it in Multnomah County for an additional year, really build the features up a little bit further before we actively start engaging other of the counties. And I would also say that DOC has been our partner back from 2014 when this all began with the NIC Oregon project, and DOC has potentially expressed interest as hosting it once we get down the road to that statewide system. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll second that. It seems like the natural trajectory is to go statewide on this, and they presented that their approach is they're going to do a little bit of experimentation and implementation and then evaluation, in chunks rather than do the whole thing as an experiment and then implement and then evaluate. And so it seems like it's a built-in model for scaling full system statewide. I don't see how it cannot go statewide, frankly. And our little buy-in here for $20,000 kind of confirms it, because now we're part of this project too.
Well, and we already made a previous investment. I think it's a valid concern to make sure that, all counties are heard, and how it might be used in their particular jurisdictions. And maybe that executive board might have an outside representative on it, if you will. Might be a positive idea. Any other thoughts or discussion about the system at all?
Just a couple of suggestions, and you may have already done it, but I think this would be a great presentation for the ODA board at 1 or 2 annual conferences, so the other counties can, and the DAs can, quite frankly, salivate over what you're doing. It's just phenomenal. And obviously it may need adjustments county by county, but we're all operating the same basic system. Victims directed, and I can't see a lot of modification necessary once you get all the bugs worked out. Second thing I comment, what state could take a lesson from this, because you're doing little bits and testing. We've seen large projects at the state that.
So, if I may, Chair, continuing to recuse myself as a commission member, but speaking as CDA, that's exactly the vision, Commissioner Bovet, is to, at the appropriate time, a little bit of this is ODA has received a verbal summary at one of our monthly meetings, just to update them, just very, I wouldn't call it casually, but not of this magnitude at this point. But they're ready now that we are finished with phase 1. Part of this is, when do you bring people in order to, at times, sometimes crush yourself with the weight of interest? And so there was a strategic desire amongst the partners to get as far as we've gone, do the next step while that's the transitional period of beginning to kind of do just what's happened here. These two presented to local public safety, LIPSIC up in Multnomah County here about a month ago. So a broader array of eyes and ears as it relates to Multnomah County, understanding that this isn't just Multnomah County. The vision, that's why DOC has been an extremely important partner from the conception, and the reach out to CJC is in an effort to not just give lip service to the expansion, but tangible expansion. Director Peters is on that executive board, as you've heard now, Executive Director Schmidt. The next step is work through phase 2 and begin its rollout. And then there will be no doubt some customization as it rolls out to some degree amongst local counties.
Commissioner, first,
No,
oh, I thought you had something, go ahead. Commissioner Hicks?
got me thinking to some battle on the legislative session passed where we were trying to get the credit for time served, and probably everybody at the table just about worked on that, and it just took session after session to do it. But the moral of the story was that for many years, and I'm way overstating it, but basically the only entity in the state that knew how long people were going to be in prison was the DOC. Basically, there was no other way of knowing until they arrived, because certain crimes, the credit time served was credited a certain way there. So we got that ironed out statutorily. But I can imagine the frustration of a victim and the absolute, the frustration even of the district attorney's victim services offices when they are assuring someone that a person's going to be in prison for a certain sentence, and then the person's out on the street and no one told them, and DOC wasn't connected with the DA's office, and so there's a lot of opportunity here, I think, to get that pretty well ironed out from the victim's perspective. So I'd like to see us continue going in that direction.
Great with that. I was actually a victim of a crime. I think I used to know the exact date, January 10th through January 15th, 1995. I was robbed at gunpoint. And it eventually led to me volunteering for a local community policing office, and I became a reserve police officer. And the interesting thing is, we ended up taking a person into custody one evening, and I said, God, this guy looks familiar. The name sounds familiar. I ended up, when I ran the guy, he was the same guy that had robbed me at gunpoint. And I remember, I was a little taken aback by it, and it jostled me because I had no idea, what had happened to the couple guys that had robbed me, and I had a badge and a gun, and I was still a little shook up that that's the guy that did it to me. So, from a victim standpoint, I think it's a great idea. I think it'd be great to be able to go and see exactly what's happening, if they're out, if they're in. I think originally they had gotten 7 or 8 year sentences. I was worried about it because they were, the district attorney at the time had told me that they were pretty hardcore gang members, and, are you sure you want to testify? So I was always nervous about that. And so it would have been nice for me to personally know, what was happening with the folks that did that to me and where they went. So with that, I'm going to call for a vote. Representative Stark, are you still there on the phone?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I guess I'll start with you for a vote for the $20,000.
I'm a yes.
Commissioner Hicks?
Yes.
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 Recused?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes for me, so passed.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Next.
So thank you,
Yes.
if I may, thank you to the two of you.
Thank you, I apologize.
Continuing as MCDA, thank you for your continued interest in our project, in our shared project.
Next, we're going to have Tiffany Quintero come up and give us an update on the specialty court case management system.
Yeah, I'll be very quick.
Welcome. And I was going to say, we've got a number of items, so my goal is to have us out here in no more than 30, 40 minutes.
Perfect. So I'm happy to say that we finally have a contract for the case management system. I think I've been working on it longer than most of you have been commissioners, with the exception of Grace. So we have that, and we will be rolling that out. We've done a ton of planning up front to be able to get to this point, and The contract is with 5 Point Solutions, which is also our contractor for the STOP project, which you'll be hearing a little bit more about in a few minutes. But the implementation process for that is set to start around July 2018. We have 2 pilots that we plan to do, and then we have a set of Group 1 courts that we will be rolling out. We'll stop for a break around November and December just to get through the holidays, and then we'll be rolling it out to the rest of the counties following that, beginning January, and hope to be done by March. So it's a fairly aggressive rollout, but we've been doing a lot of work with the vendor and getting the system ready. We'll be doing a lot of user acceptance testing between now and we'll roll it out in July.
Could you refresh my memory? Was it more of an off-the-shelf?
So it's software as a service.
Yes.
So we purchased it and now we are customizing it for the state.
Any other questions or concerns?
Second. So, Commissioners, you are, probably aware of what a case management system is for specialty courts. It allows everybody in the courtroom, the defense attorney, the district attorney, the health person at the table who's working with the defendant or the client, the judge. They can all communicate, share information. Tiffany and our team has put in just a ton of work on this. It's got a lot of different things that we're really excited about. For example, a lot of folks in treatment courts do urinalysis testing, UA testing, to make sure compliance with the court. Well, in this contract and agreement, we've set it up so that we can have instantaneous test results delivered right to the courtroom in the case management system as soon as the lab knows. For any court that's working with Redwood Labs, which actually is most of the courts in the state who use urinalysis testing. So instantaneous results, which is from a best practice standpoint, absolutely crucial, because you need to have swift and certain reactions and sanctions where that's appropriate, and everybody on the team needs to have that information so they can immediately jump into case management mode when working with people to make sure that they're safe and getting the treatment they need and being successful. So we're very excited about the functionality. It's going to allow all the participants in the courtroom to work together, to share information very quickly, help them staff those cases so that we are in compliance and doing all of the best practice things that we need to do to get the best results that the evidence says is possible for specialty courts. From a commission standpoint, that's a great service. It's part of our role in the state to be a clearinghouse for best practices and doing those things. It's also going to give us an unprecedented level and amount of data to look at what's working in the state and looking at outcomes in a systematic way that's not been possible in Oregon and not really possible in most places that don't have a unified system of case management for specialty courts. So an absolute opportunity for us to be able to go into the legislature when we're making an ask for $14 and $15 million to continue to fund our specialty court programs, to really show, and these are the outcomes we're getting. And we're going to have all the different types of courts. You got veterans, mental health, adult, drug, family, juvenile, DUI courts, all the courts that we support. For the first time ever, we're going to actually have data that we're going to be able to pull to help make that case that this is a good investment for the state of Oregon to continue to fund. So I can't thank Tiffany enough, who has literally been working till 2 a.m. on contracts for the last couple of weeks for the various things we have going on. And Dave Factor in the back of the room there has been instrumental in helping us navigate these things. Oregon Alcohol and Drug Policy Safety or Drug Policy Commission has absolutely been integral, also helping us. And Rita, since she's come on board, this is her new task. So we're really excited to have this come online. It's a huge step forward, and will put us in a position to be one of the, if not the forefront again of drug courts and data and information in the country. So really excited.
Thank you for the update.
I do have one follow-up question.
Quickly.
Quick, I'll make it quick. And I think I already know the answer, but just want to double check. The case management system is tied in with those programs that are supported and funded by CJC, not programs that exist outside of the CJC funding pipeline. Is that right?
No, we're providing it statewide. So the case management system will be the case management system for all specialty courts across the state. So there's about 70. We fund 41. And we will be right now, we will be going to those counties, visiting them and bringing them on.
Will we have access to their data then?
Yes. So all the reporting in.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, next I want to, we'll get the Senate Bill 1041 update from John Farrell.
Chair Paul, Commissioners. I was hired by CJC to work on Senate Bill 1041. I have both a clinical and research background, which I bring to this work, which is really about mapping out the money, the public, is that all right? There we go. Mapping out the public money spent on addiction treatment in Oregon, the public money spent, and then also what are the outcomes that we get for that spend in terms of types of treatment. I started at the end of October, beginning of November, met with about 40 different people. I've met with the 4 agencies that are in the Senate bill: Oregon Health Authority, the Department of Corrections, Oregon Youth Authority, and DHS. And I started the work really with mapping out the budgetary part of that. And at this point, everybody's been very, very cooperative. I have numbers. The total that we spend in a biennium is about $350 million. That number doesn't really mean a lot without the context of how many people are being treated, what types of treatment people are getting. And so that's the work right now, which is really looking at the different data systems at these different agencies and getting that data and doing some analysis and linking it up with how much we're spending. This has been an issue for many years. And part of the challenge is that a lot of the data that we have on addiction outcomes are siloed in different agencies. And what we'd like to do is be able to get identified data from these different agencies and have the integrated client services warehouse at OHA be able to do analyses where they're able to cross over different agencies so that we can then basically output non-duplicated people who have been through treatment. So we have accurate numbers of how many people are being treated for the amount of money that we're spending. That's something that we haven't been able to do. There are 2 pathways with this work. One is that we go about setting up agreements and getting kind of a one-time data pull to put this together and do a report. We could do that, but I think what's better is if we invest the time and energy right now, which is what I'm trying to do, in convincing the different agencies to put together a process where this continues on and where once ICS does their analyses and we get the output, that it gets put into dashboards that are ongoing, that a variety of stakeholders can use. The benefit of these dashboards and the benefits of us having good outcome data is that it allows us to then start making changes within the addiction treatment system and knowing what works and what doesn't. There is no question that we have challenges within our system. And there's a lot of people that right now are working very, very hard to improve the system. But without good data and without a system to be able to measure these changes, it's going to be very hard to know what's working and what's not. So that's kind of a very quick overview. The report's due September 19, 2019. Do you guys have any questions at this point?
Any questions from commissioners?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Ken Sanchagrin, did I get that right? Give us an update on the Justice Reinvestment, the 3% research update.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I decided to include a PowerPoint simply based on the sheer number of projects that we have, so we can keep track as we go through, but I'll keep this generally brief. I've broken down the projects by biennium and then also the ending section for the county retained funds. Generally, when we look across all of the different 3% projects that we are administering at this moment, they're all going very well. So I'm happy to see that they're all progressing. They seem to be on track. We've had a few hiccups here and there, but we are getting those in the direction on the timeline that we need to have on. Focusing on the first 15-17 biennium, as far as the first couple projects are concerned, our 416 project, which I included a little background on each slide, but I won't necessarily touch on those, so I'm not reading directly off. But for the 416 project, enrollment should be completed by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, and then we will be able to get a full look at our data and begin to look at the effectiveness of the 416 programs. Preliminary analyses from Wayne County are very promising. The analyses that we have looked at in Marion so far have not been quite as good. They've not necessarily been bad, but they've been kind of in the middle. But what we've really seen is that what we're thinking is that Marion County has made so many positive moves thus far that what we've seen from Lane is that Lane has been bringing their programs into around the same position as Marion. So those are kind of the preliminary things that we're seeing there. As far as the short-term transitional housing project, that is in full swing as of this week. I had the pleasure to travel down to Douglas County last week to meet with the folks in community corrections there. Douglas County is the last county to come fully on board with this project, and they should be enrolling participants as of right now. We also have some trainings coming up in Umatilla County in the next coming weeks to make sure that the POs who are participating there are fully trained as far as how the survey system is built and the timing that they're supposed to have for this. Yes.
Ken, could you just say an RCT in there and just briefly mention what that is and how the importance of that?
Certainly. So both of these projects, the 416 program and the short-term transitional housing project, are both random control trials, which is the gold standard as far as evidence-based practices are concerned. Using the short-term transitional housing project as an example, when individuals in our 3 participating counties exit incarceration, they are randomly assigned to either receive program housing through the county. So this is temporary transitional housing. They can last up to 30 days. That is supposed to provide them with an opportunity to get back on their feet without having to worry about one of the most important things that all human beings need, which is a roof over your head. The other individuals who are not selected for participation in that program, there are other programs available for them through the community, but it is not provided directly by the county in that instance. So by randomly assigning individuals into those different categories, we're able to essentially control for people who might be, for example, if they got a prison, they are better utilizing county systems. So there's something slightly different about them than individuals who do not feel like they are able to fill out the correct forms or go through that process. We're able to essentially get past any of those type of selection issues, and it gives us a more robust estimate as to whether the program is working or not. And so in this RCT, what we then do is probation officers perform an initial assessment. There is then a monthly assessment that the probation officer will fill out that's slightly shorter so that we can track over time how their housing needs are evolving. So even past the 30-day window to where we have housing for the individuals in the treatment group that is provided for them. What are they transitioning to? How do they see the quality of their housing? How is that affecting their employment status, education status? How is that essentially helping them re-enter into society following? So both, as I said, both 416 and the short-term transitional housing are progressing very well. The last 3% project from the 15-17 biennium is the defendant assessment report project. The main motivation behind this project was to examine whether relying on a defendant's assessment report, relying on something that is kind of quantitative and empirical as a kind of motivating factor for selecting downward departures, whether that results in better outcomes. At this moment, the project is somewhat in, as some of my researchers have said, in hibernation mode, because we are waiting to see, waiting till we can actually measure the outcomes for those participants. Moving on to the 17-19 biennium, several of these projects are still in the kind of beginning planning stages, but I can say we're very happy that our length of stay project, which looks at the relationship between the length of prison stay and the likelihood of future recidivism, we awarded a contract to a research group of 4 individuals at Portland State. We've had a kickoff meeting last month for that project, and we are currently working with the researchers at TSU to do an initial data draw for them. They're going to come up and visit us in a couple of weeks so that we can identify the data that they need to proceed with the project. The second project is a examination of
several aspects of the LSCMI to see how well it predicts recidivism in the state of Oregon, to look at differences between probationers and whether they're receiving treatment that corresponds with their LSCMI scores, and to see who is most successful as far as looking at LSCMI score change over time. That project is currently in the procurement process. We have that out, the scope of work, our documents are prepared, and we're putting that through the procurement office so we can get that out and then solicit bids on that project. Finally, we also have a pretrial project. This is a study that aims to examine the relationship between the length of pretrial detention and sentencing outcomes in the state. The CJC has elected to keep this project in-house. One thing that we have been something we've had a big desire to get access to is jail data from counties throughout the state. And so we are essentially trying to build relationships with counties to get access to that data. And we figured that if we're going to do all of the front, very heavy lifting to get that data, then it may be something that might be better for us to, once we get it, to actually use the data, to learn how it's constructed, to learn the pitfalls of working with it, and then to move forward and do the analyses ourselves. And myself and Kelly Officer, who I'm sure that most of you have met before, we have multiple phone calls with counties. I believe we have 5 in the next 5 phone calls, so 5 different counties in the next 4 working days to try to get access. And so far, the response has been very positive from counties wanting to participate in this program and at least preliminarily, give us access to their data. We'll see if we're able to actually come through and get it from all of those organizations, but we're feeling pretty good about that so far.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
Yes, Chair Ball. Excuse me. Is there any desire institutionally from the CJC to get every county using the same risk assessment tool in terms of pretrial jail usage? I know one county, for example, where I used to work, that uses its own tool that doesn't seem to match anybody else's. Do we care about that?
I think that certainly from a research perspective, that would be a confounding factor that would be nice to solve if everybody uses the same risk assessment, and that makes me as a researcher very happy. I can say that myself and Director Schmidt, we've not discussed that directly thus far, but certainly I think that would be very nice.
Thank you, Director Schmidt.
Yeah, just as the commission is aware, we are in the process of reconstituting the Public Safety Task Force, whose job is really going to be oversee looking at our pretrial system. And that is going to be one of the issues that they take up, is looking at availability of pretrial risk assessment tools, and then considering whether or not to make a recommendation to the legislature as to whether or not uniformity would be a good thing, or whether or not a local control model where different counties can use different tools, as long as they're using tools, would still be advantageous. So it's very much a live question that's going to be debated in the Public Safety Task Force. Obviously, counties like Lane have a tool that they've been using for a very long time. And other counties as well. So I think there's a lot of kind of people who are wedded to what they've been doing. So it'll be a conversation to figure out whether or not we should have a statewide tool or to retain what we have.
Thanks. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
So this almost applies to all of these projects. I mean, in terms of comparing apples to apples, whether the person has been charged, I mean, well, let's take it to the length of stay study, for example. So you have somebody who went to the DOC on assault to 70 months, measure 11. Then you have somebody who went to DOC because they had a string of property crimes. Do you compare those two and then get recidivism data based upon that? Because you've got a length of stay that you're studying, you've got 70 months, but going in, probably not the same inclination. I don't know. How do you do that? How do you grapple with that? Grapple with that?
Sure. So yes, all of those offenders would be included in the model. You can actually make a statistical model that includes any type of offender that is currently found in the DOC, for example, serving a stay. But the beauty of the multivariate modeling techniques that we can utilize today is that as long as you have some sort of variable that differentiates between those different offenders, whether it's just controlling for a certain type of crime, or certainly, yes, one of the primary predictors would be that length of stay, but it will obviously be different depending on the type of crime you have, your criminal history. All of those factors can be put into the model individually, and you are able to essentially isolate the individual contribution of each of those factors. And so that's kind of the beauty of the statistical models that PSU will be running, is that we have a wealth of data on all of those factors. And so in the end, we can essentially compare apples to apples. So we could say 4 individuals charged with the same measure of 11 crimes of the same or at least substantially similar criminal histories, what are the outcomes that we see across those 2 individuals? Or we can compare like groups, but then only vary on a certain factor. So for example, if we're interested in racial disparities or even different crime disparities, we can say somebody with the same criminal history, but with 2 different measure 11 crimes, how might that affect their outcome?
Any other questions? Tiffany was going to come back and join. And both of you were going to give us. Oh, you did. I'm sorry.
I do have.
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
Mainly just on the retained funds.
Oh, sorry.
All of those projects are on track. There were some questions about the 15-17 Run project in Multnomah County. We met with Multnomah County earlier, actually it was late last week, run together a little bit, late last week, and it seems they have a good plan moving forward to close out that project by June 2019. But I have a phone call coming up in the end of the month with folks in Lane County, but it seems that all of those programs are very much on track.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so Ken and I are both leads for different purposes on the STOP project. So for those of you that are not aware, House Bill 2355 created the STOP project, Statistical Transparency of Policing. And our part of that is to do the research analysis on data elements that are collected by the law enforcement. But as the business lead, CJC is a part of the contracting and the development of the work of the solution that goes into the law enforcement agencies that will be collecting those data elements to identify patterns and practices of policing and officer-initiated pedestrian and traffic stops. So that's kind of the language around that. We will not take control of this system until July of 2020. At that time, we will be doing all the support and maintenance of it through CJC. Until then, Oregon State Police is handling the solution and the maintenance and support and rollout and implementation with the staff that they receive. But July of 2018 is when law enforcement agencies are required to start reporting the data into the solution for Tier 1 agencies. And I'll let Ken go ahead and talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So on the research side at CJC, we've been working diligently to develop the methodologies that we are going to utilize once data reporting begins. Hopefully, we've been speaking with many of the Tier 1 LEAs as well to kind of engage both in outreach. We had a research meeting with them a few weeks ago, and we had representatives from the top level chiefs or sheriffs and individuals from their research arms attend our meeting a few weeks ago to discuss the research methodologies that we were considering using and to address any concerns that they have. So we've been kind of in talks with them. We have been doing the research as well to try to determine what is the best way to kind of attack this statistical problem that we're going to be facing as the data begins rolling in. And right now what we have is a draft plan that I'm still currently finalizing that will employ a research matrix. So we will not be focusing on a single methodology to assess whether there are indicators of racial disparities in the traffic stop data, but instead we'll be using multiple methodologies. The justification for this is both so that we don't, essentially all of these statistical approaches to looking at traffic stop data are flawed to one extent or another. And so we do not want to pick one single flawed method. We would rather be able to try to use several flawed methods to look at these outcomes, but at least each of the methods are able to address some of the drawbacks found in the others. In addition to that, even though a traffic stop at first blush appears to be a single instance of an officer-citizen encounter, there are often multiple steps at which racial disparities can appear, whether that's at the initial decision to stop, the decision to search, the decision to cite, the decision to arrest, et cetera. So there are different approaches that are more appropriate depending on the type of, or the place you are in an individual stop. And I'd be more than happy to, at a future commission meeting, to give a presentation that basically I can build off of the one that I presented to the LEAs last month. It provides a little bit more detail on the methodologies that we have selected. But we are, like I said, kind of currently building that out so that we can have a hard, fast plan in place so that when data begins to flow, hopefully, right, kind of not too long after the beginning of the collection period, we'll be able to pilot those, and then we'll be able to be ready when the final data dump occurs in July 2019 to quickly get our report ready for the legislature by December of that year.
So can I ask, what if the data is flawed coming in from the different areas, you think it might be, how might that translate to whatever report you give to the legislature?
Oh, if the data is flawed from the agencies? I think that a lot of thought and very deliberate planning has gone into identifying and defining the data elements thus far. And so I think that we, along with the stakeholder engagement group, have been trying as best as possible to ensure that the data that we'll be collecting is sound kind of from the very beginning. That being said, one thing that we will be doing is data auditing very early. We're hoping, and we've received at least some indications from some law enforcement agencies that they may plan on submitting data monthly. We're hoping that that ends up being the case. That will allow us to begin that audit process early, and we might be able to intervene if we are seeing that there are potential data issues. Many other states have performed pretty detailed audit procedures. Most don't publish much on how they do it, but luckily there are a few that we've been able to build off of to use them as a model so that we can detect both data anomalies or just problems with reporting. We're able to know what are some of the common problem areas to where the data is either often not reported correctly or may actually be flawed. And so we have some things that we can kind of keep an eye out for as we go through. But that'll be something that we'll have to wait certainly till the data comes in to see, and then hopefully if they're reporting early, we can interact with the agency itself, perhaps with the vendor if it appears to be a solution issue, and we can go from there to see what the problem might be.
Any other questions from commissioners? So just one more question I have. So if the CJC is going to take that over that collection, and would you say 2020? Is that right? Do we have any kind of, or I would just encourage you to have something in mind to, I guess, figure out how statewide you'll be getting better data. And are there any agencies doing it well that you could use as a model or an example at this point? Or not?
So by 2020, when we take that system over, all of the law enforcement agencies will be on board already and be submitting data into the solution we currently have.
That we have.
Yeah. So at that point, we won't have to do the implementation work anymore. That will be right at that point.
Good. Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay. No questions? Okay. Next thing is an update on the Justice Reinvestment, the grantee update. Ross Caldwell.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I've got my eye on the clock. I know we're getting close to 4 o'clock. I'm going to give you a quick update on the 4 provisional counties. So as you'll all remember from the Justice Reinvestment Grant application funding decisions that you had to make for this biennium, we have 4 counties, Lynn, Polk, Jefferson, and Tillamook, that were given the provisional 1-year status, and then we're going to check back in and see how they're doing, see what changes they wanted to make. And surprisingly enough, we're at that point almost to check in. So your next meeting is going to be that date. We didn't wait a full year to check in because the counties need to build their budgets for the next year. And by the time the legislature actually funds justice reinvestment, we get the money out to the counties after the application process. It actually takes a while. So it's important to them that we review this early. So even though it feels like, I think we just had that last meeting, we're already at the next one already. So just wanted to give you a quick update, kind of the background of what we've been doing, and working with those counties. So when we started working with these counties, it was actually about 2 years ago from now. So early in the 15-17 biennium, Madeline and I started trying to identify counties who were having some challenges, whether it was putting together a plan, or often it was collaboration. It was getting everybody in the county to work together. As you've probably heard us say before, you know, one of the worst things that can happen with this grant is it just goes to community corrections agencies. Nobody really does anything different. They have some more money, they have some more resources, but nothing really changes, and people don't meet the goals of the program. So we tried to identify counties that we thought were kind of in danger of having that happen. About 2 years ago, we started going around and meeting with them, going to their lipstick meetings, or just meeting with the decision makers and the crucial stakeholders one-on-one sometimes, or in different groups, kind of very county by county. And we met successfully with every county except for Jefferson, who's not surprisingly on that list of provisional counties. Everybody else we met with, and we kind of told them, you know, this is how you're looking in the data, this is kind of what we're hearing, this is what our concerns are, and what we think our grant review committee and our commissioners will be concerned about. So we really tried to give them a heads up. And then, you know, we eventually got to the decision-making point after multiple meetings with every one of these counties except for Jefferson, where their applications were being reviewed, and then 4 of them did end up in that provisional status. So it was kind of a lot of build-up before that. And I'm giving this background in part because we have a new commissioner, but just so you guys all kind of remember this stuff, because it goes back a long ways. This is an ongoing program. It was not kind of a one-and-done thing, as I know you're all aware. And so we had those funding decisions. We had those 4 counties that got the provisional funding. And since that point, we have gone out and we've successfully met with all of them at least once. We've had lots of emails, lots of phone calls, and then at least one in-person meeting with all of them. And so they're all putting together what kind of changes they want to make to their programs. And what our plan is we have a meeting of the grant review committee scheduled for the 18th of next month. So they're going to get together for 4 hours, and they're going to take the deep dive on this. The last time they got together on these counties, they spent 7 or 8 hours kind of going over every single one of them in depth, all the ones that got provisional funding and all the ones that got full funding, as well as the supplemental grants. So they really dug in on these, as I know you guys did as well on your meeting. So they're going to go over those, and they're also going to have, each county is going to be provided with 20 minutes to come and kind of make their case. So we don't want this just being Madeline and I called as the witnesses to talk for or against these counties, but we also want them to come and make their case, and that's something that they've asked for in a couple of those counties. So I know they're all working on it. They're you know, they're coming up with different ideas and seeing what everybody's kind of willing to do and working with them through that process. So a lot is happening on this, and the grant review committee is going to take a deep dive on that on the 18th, and then you'll hear their recommendations as well as what the changes and plans are from those 4 counties at your next meeting, which I believe has yet to be scheduled, but it'll probably be late April, early May sometime. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Any questions about any of that, or comments, or anything you want us to focus on in particular?
Just a real quick question. Remind us again what the 4 counties are. I think I remember.
Lynn, Polk, Jefferson, and Tillamook.
I think the one thing I had expressed to Director Smith that, you know, that was one of those issues where we had a divided vote. And so I think it's very important that we really understand their point of view and that we have concrete, you know, things that we can point to one way or another to make our decisions. And it wasn't as clear to me the last meeting. You know, we're relying on the grant committee, and I really want to make sure that that we hear their case.
Yeah, we're really trying to give them every opportunity. The kind of reapplication process, which you'll see the result of, is pretty broadly worded because every county's got their own issues and they're kind of making their own plans. And we really wanted to try to give them a chance to explain that in as few or as many words as they think it would take, and then also to kind of show up in person. And the grant review committee, you know, based on our rules, they really take the deep dive on this. So we wanted to, you know, carve out 4 hours of their time, which has been very difficult to schedule, but we've eventually got it on the books. So.
Any other questions or concerns about that? Okay.
Okay, thank you. And just one more thing, for the agenda today. Hood River and Washington counties have both, asked to make amendments to their justice reinvestment programs. Hood River wants to move $85,000, into a mentorship program. And, they're going to, if this is approved, they're going to contract with Mid-Columbia Center for Living. And they're gonna hire a peer mentor to work with offenders that are currently under supervision, and they'll assist the folks on supervision with things like accessing treatment and recovery services, attending supervision appointments, and then kind of all the job training and, getting your ID back, parenting courses, housing, all those kind of things, that mentors traditionally do. So, 85,000 is a significant chunk of Hood River's justice reinvestment funds, because they're a relatively small county. And about half of it, just under 40,000, is coming from carryover from last biennium. And then the rest is coming out of their drug and alcohol treatment budget that they asked for in this one. So we kind of check back with them to make sure that this is not gonna, they're still gonna have enough access to treatment for these folks. And they said that they do have, they fund that out of their grant aid money from Department of Corrections, and they have enough of that. They're just not burning through that as quick as they thought they would. And so they're asking to move this into a mentor program. So we kind of looked into it, had a lot of back and forth with them, and it seems like a good idea. And I think it's definitely something that would have been approved if this would have been asked for at the beginning. So we don't see any issues with it as staff. I don't know if you want to take these one at a time or.
If there's no objection, you want to hear the next one, and we'll take them as one.
Okay. The second one, Washington County, they are asking to move a substantially larger amount of money. They're asking to move $367,000, and this is all coming from carryover from last biennium. So this is all unspent funds. And they want to move that money into hiring 2 additional probation officers to supervise downward departure cases. So Washington County's money goes into their IRIS program, which is an intensive supervision downward departure program. And they want to hire 2 more POs to work with that program and provide additional services. So it's in line with what they're already doing.
Is that 416 specific downward departures or downward departures in general, and does it matter to us?
So this is actually, these POs are going to specifically work with people that are getting downward departures that are not part of the IRIS program previously. So I think that we've seen this in some other counties where if you start a specific downward departure program and you start trying to find additional people to downward depart to probation, and you've got all these, additional services and treatment options and all these things that you didn't have already, you start to look at your population that you already gave downward departures to and saying, we were already giving downward departures to some of these folks, but now the new people who are sometimes, arguably more risky are getting better access to services. And so why can't we have lower caseloads for the other people we supervise? So that's basically what they're trying to do. So they're mostly property offenders, some drug crime offenders, and then also some person crime offenders that they found they were already getting downward departures to. And I think that their IRIS program has kind of got out a little ahead of traditional parole and probation. So this is an effort with those unspent funds to catch them up and try to reduce their revocation rate, frankly. So I think it's a good idea. And we've kind of looked into it. It seems like a good idea. $367,000 is a lot of money, but it's almost about 10% of what Washington County gets. So it's a lot more than we're talking about in Hood River, but it's still a relatively small amount. Again, it's coming out of their carryover. So
Yeah, and if successful, it's much less than what prison would cost. So.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
So I think we should vote on those 2 requests. Do I have a motion?
A motion to approve both of those requests.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so moved. I also want to mention, so the staff knows, the District Attorney Clackamas County wrote a letter after our last vote with concerns about the, our vote as a board to say, hey, look, we want to, take a closer look at you. And so I called them up and I said, look, I want to have lunch with you. And I took the letter and I really wrote questions down, and I really took the time to spend with John to really understand what his concerns were. And what I just wanted to say is that that to me, his concerns are very valid. So I think it's important for us to recognize it all, and, he really wants to ensure that all sides are being heard as we're going through this process, to both your guys' point, when we had the vote. And so that's why I think it's extremely important for the staff to really break down for us so we understand, the differences as you see them, and why the grant committee, is voting or thinking the way that they're thinking. I think that's really important. So, I mean, it was a really good meeting, and, he's to me, he expressed, supportive, comments for his commission, but, and I had some of the, frankly, the same questions here when I saw the graphs and, like, what really is making the difference and what isn't. One of the questions I posed to him is, well, I know I went to a DUI court and I saw that there were people there that were not going to reoffend. So maybe you see counties that perform the same way, but what would happen if we weren't doing what we did and we hadn't invested in these courts? And, I think he took that point fairly. So again, I just think it's really important for us to hear, specifically, with more exactness, what are the issues and how that may statistically bear out, towards the success of, what the overall program goals are. Because, he had a very long history. I thought it was very compelling.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. We made it, yes. Oh, that was the end. We did the last item. Just a few minutes after the stated goal. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting officially, and want to thank everybody for the time and attendance today.
Have a good night.